Cleishindra Hall, or Clea as her friends called her, was on the cusp of an extraordinary future. An honors student just 2 weeks away from high school graduation, Clea had dreams bigger than her small hometown. She was set to attend Tennessee State University on a pre-med track, with hopes of becoming a pediatrician. That night, she was working her part-time job at the home office of a local doctor, a routine she had followed for months. Around 8 p.m., Clea made her usual call to her mother, Laurel. She said she'd be ready to come home later and promised to call again when she finished her tasks. It was a simple, ordinary exchange. A mother waiting to pick up her daughter. A daughter wrapping up her shift. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But Clea never called back. The hours stretched into the night, and the Hall household, once filled with the sounds of family chatter, grew eerily quiet. Laurel Hall drifted off to sleep, confident that her daughter would call when ready. Yet, as the clock ticked past midnight, the realization dawned: Clea wasn't home. She had vanished. Cleishindra Hall was an achiever in every sense of the word. At just 18 years old, she was weeks away from completing high school as an honor student, the kind of daughter every parent dreams of raising. Her ambition was clear: she wanted to become a pediatrician, a goal she had worked toward with unwavering focus. Her acceptance into Tennessee State University's pre-med program was not just a milestone, it was the first step toward a future she had carefully mapped out. That summer, she was set to intern at a Boston pediatrician's office, an opportunity few her age could claim. Her days were a balancing act of academics, work, and family. After school, she held a part-time job at the home office of Dr. Larry Amos, a local physician in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. It was a modest role, primarily organizing files and assisting with office duties. For Clea, it was practical, a way to earn some money and gain experience. The arrangement also provided a sense of routine and normalcy. Clea's routine was simple yet consistent. After her shift, she would call her mother, Laurel, for a ride home. They had a system. Clea would call when she was ready, and Laurel, who always looked forward to picking her up, would head out. That Monday evening seemed no different. At 8 p.m., Clea called home. Her voice was calm, as it always was. She told her mother she wasn't quite done with work and would call again when it was time to be picked up. Laurel agreed and waited patiently. But as the minutes turned to hours, the call Laurel was expecting never came. By the time the clock struck midnight, concern gave way to alarm. Laurel had fallen asleep while waiting but awoke in the early hours of May 10th to realize Clea wasn't home. She quickly checked the phone, half expecting to find a missed call or message. There was nothing. Panic set in as Laurel moved through the house, calling for Clea, knowing deep down that her daughter was not there. She woke her husband, Willie Hall, and together they tried to piece together what might have gone wrong. Clea was always punctual, always responsible. This was not like her. As the minutes turned to hours, desperation took hold. Laurel began calling anyone who might know where Clea was: friends, classmates, anyone who might have seen her that night. But every call ended the same way: no answers, just confusion and growing alarm. By the time the sun began to rise, it was clear something was terribly wrong. Determined to take action, the Halls went to the Pine Bluff Police Department to report their daughter missing. But what they encountered was an obstacle they hadn't anticipated. The officers informed them that because Clea was 18, legally an adult, they would have to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. For Laurel, this response felt like a betrayal. Every second that passed without action was a second lost in finding her daughter. The Halls returned home, hearts heavy with frustration and fear, unsure of where to turn next. News of Clea's disappearance spread quickly through Pine Bluff, a close-knit town where families knew each other, and neighbors often watched out for one another. As word got out, the community rallied around the Halls. Friends and neighbors gathered at the family's home, offering support and brainstorming ways to help. Groups were organized to search the surrounding areas. Flashlights in hand, volunteers combed through wooded paths, backyards, and nearby streets, calling Clea's name into the night. Flyers bearing her photo and description were printed and distributed, taped to storefront windows and handed out to anyone who might have seen her. Despite the collective effort, unease began to grow. The whispers started quietly, spreading from one concerned household to another. Could Clea have been abducted? Was it possible she ran into trouble on her way home? And if she hadn't called her mother, what stopped her from doing so? The lack of answers only fueled speculation. Pine Bluff was not immune to the fears that come with uncertainty. Parents began to hold their children closer, keeping a more watchful eye as the hours turned to days. Clea's friends struggled to make sense of her absence, replaying every interaction, every conversation, searching for clues they might have missed. For the Hall family, the weight of the unknown was unbearable. Laurel stayed awake late into the night, hoping for a call that never came, while Willie worked tirelessly to stay strong for the family. They clung to hope, even as the enormity of the situation began to settle over them. Their daughter, so full of promise, so close to achieving her dreams, was gone without a trace. What started as a single missing call had now become a void that consumed an entire community. Pine Bluff was left with more questions than answers, and every passing moment made the search for Cleashindra Hall feel more urgent, yet increasingly daunting. The first threads of Cleashindra Hall's disappearance began to unravel at her part-time job, the last known location where she was seen. Dr. Larry Amos, who operated his medical office from his home, stated that Clea had finished her tasks for the evening and departed around 8:30 p.m. According to his account, she entered an unknown vehicle. Beyond that, he claimed to know little else. This statement became the cornerstone of the early investigation. Authorities considered the possibility that Clea had willingly left the premises. Theories were floated, perhaps she had been picked up by a friend or someone she trusted. Yet this notion clashed with what her family and friends knew about her. Clea was methodical and cautious, particularly when it came to her routine. Another troubling possibility was also considered. If Clea had left the office alone and attempted to walk home or meet someone nearby, she might have been intercepted along the way. The lack of witnesses made it impossible to determine whether she had chosen to leave or been compelled to do so. Law enforcement faced significant hurdles in piecing together the events of that evening. With no direct witnesses to confirm who picked Clea up, or if anyone had at all, their options were limited. In 1994, advancements like cell phone tracking and surveillance footage were either unavailable or sparse. Investigators relied on traditional methods, interviewing neighbors and passers-by, hoping for a lead that might shed light on her movements after leaving the office. As days turned into weeks, the urgency to find Clea grew. Her name and face became fixtures in Pine Bluff, on flyers, in conversations, and on the local news. The pressure on law enforcement mounted, especially as rumors circulated in the community, each one painting a different version of what might have occurred. 2 weeks after Clea's disappearance, police secured a search warrant for Dr. Amos' property, the place where she had been last seen. The delay in obtaining the warrant raised questions within the community and particularly for Clea's family. The passage of time allowed for the possibility that key evidence, if it existed, had been removed or destroyed. When investigators finally searched the home and office, they reported finding no signs of a struggle or evidence that Clea had been harmed there. The search, while extensive, offered no breakthroughs. The lack of physical evidence only deepened the mystery, leaving behind unanswered questions about what transpired that night. The absence of solid leads forced the investigation into a speculative phase. Police considered whether Clea might have left with someone she knew. Her outgoing nature and friendly demeanor made it plausible that she had trusted the wrong person. However, without witnesses or tangible evidence, the theory remained unsubstantiated. Technological limitations further hampered progress. In a pre-digital age, investigators lacked the tools now considered standard in missing person cases. There were no cell phone records to analyze, no GPS data to track her location, and few surveillance cameras in residential areas to review. Every avenue relied on human memory and testimony, both of which were prone to error or omission. Each passing day without new information became a reminder of how fragile the investigation was. Leads grew cold, and potential witnesses became harder to locate or less reliable. For Clea's family, every update, or lack thereof, was a bitter reminder of how much remained unknown. As the investigation into Cleshindra Hall's disappearance progressed, attention naturally turned toward Dr. Larry Amos, the last known person to have seen her. His home office had been a place of familiarity for Clea, where she often worked late evenings organizing paperwork. Yet, his account of the night raised more questions than it answered. Dr. Amos maintained that Clea left his office around 8:30 p.m. and got into an unknown vehicle. When pressed for details, he claimed not to have seen who picked her up or to remember anything about the car. This lack of specifics stood out, especially considering that he was likely the only person with direct knowledge of her movements that evening. Conflicting elements in his statements began to fuel suspicions within the Pine Bluff community. Some recalled Dr. Amos' initial demeanor during the early days of the search, describing it as detached or indifferent. Others noted how quickly he seemed to distance himself from the case, offering minimal cooperation beyond his initial account. These observations, while circumstantial, added to an already uneasy narrative surrounding his involvement. The Hall family's frustrations with Dr. Amos became evident as weeks passed without progress. Laurel Hall, in particular, voiced her concerns that his property wasn't searched until 2 weeks after Clea went missing. The delay raised fears that critical evidence, if it existed, might have been destroyed or concealed. Although investigators eventually executed a warrant, the lack of any findings left an unsettling gap. In the absence of concrete evidence, Dr. Amos was never charged or formally accused of wrongdoing. However, his status as a person of interest lingered, casting a shadow over the investigation. For Clea's family and those following the case closely, his actions, or lack thereof, remained a central point of contention. With no definitive answers from Dr. Amos, law enforcement began exploring other possible avenues. One lead pointed to a local boy Clea was rumored to have liked. Though unnamed in reports, this individual became a focus of attention due to his proximity to Clea in her social circles. Investigators hoped he might provide new insight into her final hours. The boy was questioned extensively and subjected to a polygraph test. His vehicle was also searched for any evidence that might link him to Clea's disappearance. Despite the thorough examination, nothing substantial emerged. The polygraph results were inconclusive, and no physical evidence tied him to the case. This lack of clarity left investigators at a standstill, unable to confirm or dismiss his involvement. Other potential leads surfaced but quickly fizzled under scrutiny. With no witnesses stepping forward to report seeing Clea after she left the office, the investigation relied heavily on speculation and circumstantial details. The absence of surveillance footage or phone records only added to the frustration. Theories surrounding Clea's disappearance ranged widely. Some believed she might have been targeted by someone she knew and trusted, a chilling prospect that suggested her familiarity with the person could have been her vulnerability. Others speculated that her disappearance was a random act, possibly involving an opportunistic abductor who happened upon her that evening. The lack of tangible evidence became the investigation's most significant obstacle. Each lead, no matter how promising, seemed to dissolve into the same unyielding silence. Witnesses who might have seen something that night were either unaware of their importance or hesitant to come forward. The passage of time only deepened these challenges, eroding memories and potential opportunities to uncover new information. While investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle, the missing elements continued to elude them. Theories persisted, yet none offered the clarity needed to break the case open. For Clea's family and the community, the absence of answers was a constant reminder of how fragile the truth can become when lost in the gaps of time and evidence. As time passed, Cleashindra Hall's disappearance became a defining tragedy for her family and Pine Bluff. For Laurel Hall, each day without answers was another filled with frustration and heartbreak. The lingering question of what happened to her daughter became an unrelenting weight, compounded by her belief that opportunities to uncover the truth had been lost early on. Laurel and her husband, Willie, refused to let Clea's story fade into obscurity. They became vocal advocates for their daughter, speaking to anyone who would listen, reaching out to media outlets, and attending public events to share her story. Laurel's voice, calm yet resolute, became a beacon of hope for families facing similar tragedies. The broader implications of Clea's case could not be ignored. Her disappearance underscored systemic challenges faced by families of missing persons, particularly Black women. Studies and advocates have long highlighted the disparities in media coverage and law enforcement attention afforded to these cases compared to others. Clea's story was emblematic of this imbalance. While Clea's disappearance devastated her family, it also served as a rallying cry for the Pine Bluff community and beyond. Grassroots efforts to keep her memory alive included vigils, fundraisers, and renewed calls for justice. These events became more than just gatherings, they were declarations of solidarity, reminders that Clea's life and potential would not be forgotten. One significant milestone came when Clea's case was featured on Find Our Missing, a television series dedicated to shedding light on cases involving individuals of color. The episode, which recounted the events leading up to her disappearance and the subsequent investigation, helped to reignite interest in her story. For the Halls, this exposure was a bittersweet moment. While grateful for the renewed attention, it also meant reliving their pain in vivid detail. The show brought Clea's story to a wider audience, many of whom were unaware of the case or its troubling lack of resolution. The renewed visibility also prompted discussions about the systemic barriers that often impede progress in cases like hers. Questions about resources, priorities, and implicit biases within the investigative process became central to these conversations. For Clea's friends and former classmates, her absence was deeply felt. Many recalled her vibrant personality, sharp intellect, and unwavering ambition. The loss of someone with so much promise was a profound reminder of the fragility of life and the far-reaching impact of unresolved disappearances. In Pine Bluff, Clea's story became a somber touchpoint for discussions about safety, justice, and accountability. The unanswered questions surrounding her case remained a source of unease, but they also fueled a determination to protect others from similar fates. Community members often referenced her disappearance as a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly the familiar could shift into uncertainty. Clea's legacy extended beyond her immediate circle. Her name became a symbol of resilience, a rallying point for those fighting to bring attention to the stories of missing individuals who might otherwise be forgotten. For Laurel and Willie, every effort to share their daughter's story was a step toward justice, however distant it seemed. Yet, as the years wore on, the pain of unanswered questions lingered. Each anniversary of Clea's disappearance brought renewed heartache, but also a resolve to continue the search for the truth. Her family's tireless advocacy served as both a tribute to her life and a challenge to the systems that had failed her. As the years have slipped by, the questions surrounding Cleashindra Hall's disappearance remain as piercing as they were on the night she vanished. What truly happened at Dr. Larry Amos' office that evening? Did Clea finish her work and simply walk out, as he claimed? If so, who picked her up? Or, was something more concealed in those final moments, a detail missed or withheld that could unlock the truth? The lack of clarity surrounding the events that unfolded at the office leaves an unsettling void. Dr. Amos stated that Clea got into a car, yet he could not, or would not, provide any details about the vehicle or its driver. This absence of information has left investigators and Clea's loved ones grappling with the same unanswered question: how could such a significant moment be cloaked in ambiguity? If Clea left with someone, who was it? Was it a familiar face she trusted or a stranger who approached her at the wrong moment? And where did they take her? The absence of eyewitnesses or tangible evidence from that night means that these questions remain locked in the minds of those involved, whether they spoke about it or kept their silence. Beyond the procedural gaps and the unanswered queries lies the emotional endurance of Clea's family. Laurel and Willie Hall have refused to let time erode their search for the truth. Laurel, in particular, has emerged as an unshakable force, tirelessly advocating for renewed attention to her daughter's case. Their strength is a testament to the bond they shared with Clea. Her absence is more than a loss, it is a daily ache, a lingering question that follows them with every step. They carry her memory forward not only as a reminder of her potential but as a beacon to inspire hope in others enduring similar pain. In their advocacy, the Halls have reminded the world of the injustices inherent in Clea's case. The delayed investigation, the lack of public outcry, and the minimal resources allocated to finding her reflect broader issues that too often affect cases involving young Black women. Clea's family has faced these systemic challenges head-on, ensuring her name remains a symbol of persistence. Through interviews, public appeals, and constant engagement with anyone willing to listen, they have refused to let Clea's story fade into obscurity. What happened to Cleashindra Hall? This question echoes across decades, through family conversations, community vigils, and the minds of those who followed her story. It is a question that demands resolution, yet one that remains maddeningly out of reach. As the final moments of Clea's life remain a mystery, her legacy endures, carried forward by a family whose strength defies the weight of their loss. Their unwavering hope serves as a poignant reminder of the power of love and determination, even in the face of the unknown. Cleashindra Hall's story is not just about unanswered questions, it's about a life full of promise, stolen too soon. Her disappearance has left a void, not only for her family but for a community that continues to wonder how something like this could happen in their midst. But her story does not have to end here. It can live on, through awareness, action, and collective resolve. Share Clea's story. Speak her name. By doing so, we ensure that her memory remains a beacon for justice and a reminder that every missing person deserves to be found. For those who may have information, no matter how small, it is never too late to come forward. Tips can be the thread that unravels a mystery, bringing answers to a family that has waited for far too long. Resources like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, along with local hotlines, are critical tools for those who wish to help in finding Clea or any missing person. As we reflect on Clea's case, one haunting question remains: if this could happen to her, a bright, ambitious, and deeply loved young woman, could it happen to someone you know? This story is a call to vigilance, to community action, and to never taking safety for granted. It's also a call to connect. What are your thoughts? Do you have a theory about what happened that night in Pine Bluff? Could there be something we've all missed? Engage with us in the comments, share Clea's story, and join us as we continue to explore the mysteries that deserve answers. Next time, we'll uncover another case that remains shrouded in mystery, a disappearance that continues to baffle investigators and haunt those left behind. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe for more.